Here we are, Larry. We are in London.
We are in London.
The proof is through the window. And it's been already amazing the last couple of days being here together.
Yeah. Up here. Boom. Let's go.
Let's go. Let's go. Let's go.
Let's go. We haven't even started. And we're like, let's go. By Friday, after 2 days of the conference, we'll be like, people will be like, let's go. And if somebody's like, let's go, you're like, let's go. You're missing 2 words. To sleep.
Yeah, exactly. We still have 2 days of nonstop energy before that happens.
Yeah,
though.
we do.
We're about ready to go to the VIP event. That'll be fun.
Yeah.
With all the folks that bought VIP tickets, all the speakers.
Yeah. It's going to be a blast.
It will. So while you're drinking water, I'm going to say this about you.
Sure.
You have developed the best reputation amongst the NFT.NYC team. More people on the team have said good things about you behind your back than anybody else that's been involved with us for the last 4 years. You made a real mark on the team. It's one thing to make a mark on the speakers, which you have. It's one thing to make a mark on the sponsors, which you have, or your peers. But the team is not that easy to they don't walk away feeling like the most happy of feelings and totally in love with everybody that ever gets involved.
Of course.
And they do feel that with you.
Right.
And so I think just on behalf of the team, thank you for who you are and what you bring to us.
Well, thank you. So I just learned something downstairs less than an hour ago.
All right.
There's an English expression I never knew called "happy as Larry."
Happy as Larry. Now
happy as Larry.
What does that mean?
It kind of means you're okay, in spite of all of the challenges and messed up things in the world. You're like in the present.
I like that.
And you're kind of just okay with yourself and with the people around you. And I've been a little bit of a happy-go-lucky person.
Right.
I feel a little like Huckleberry Finn, like the story. He's just sort of going down the river, in a raft, and whatever's happening.
Right.
And I've had a Huckleberry Finn kind of life, just an adventure.
Right.
And when I do show up, I have a mindset, like a philosophy is not like what I can extract from people, but I honestly believe giving precedes getting.
I believe so too.
So when I first showed up into this culture, I said, how can I help?
Yeah.
And you've done the same thing from what I understand from even before me, where you showed up and said, I'm just going to start helping you and create content and start filming.
Yeah.
So I showed up at first as a Rolling Stone freelance reporter.
Right, I remember that. You jumped on Clubhouse with us.
And I just started just telling everyone how wonderful it was. And I think also, I like my life and I'm happy where I am.
Yeah.
So there's not like different sides of Larry, like kind of what you see is what you get. And I think sometimes you find your tribe.
Right.
There's also that. I've also not fit into so many places and so many situations with so many groups of people.
Yeah.
And people went to Woodstock and they came over the hill, saw 500,000 people, and they're like, I'm a weirdo. I found 500,000 other weirdos, with long hair and smoking pot.
Right.
Like people go to Dead concerts to find
Absolutely.
their tribe.
Now Fish concerts.
So I found a tribe here.
My friend Chris Ballatin wrote a book called Destined to Win. And if he only had one line in the book that struck people the most, it was a bestseller book, was you find your people, you find your purpose.
Yeah.
And how many humans are wandering around feeling purposeless because they have not yet found their people, or maybe they haven't yet committed to being part of that people, right?
I'm supposed to be interviewing you, but I have to tell you, when I was in 6th grade, which maybe is 11, 12, some age like that,
right?
These 2 boys came into our class and they played Beatles songs. And every girl kind of swooned, and every boy said, that's the coolest thing. I wish I could do that. And walking home, I literally, like something from a movie, heard a voice in my head. It wasn't schizophrenic. It was a voice from somewhere saying, if this is what you want to do, you will be a success. And so I knew from a very early age, and literally before I could even play the keyboard that I got for Christmas, I was in the band because I was the only person with the keyboard. And literally after college, I had to drop out after 1 year. It's sort of like the music version of what happened with like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. They just went to the thing they were meant to do. I immediately joined a band and was opening for Tom Petty or Queen or the Allman Brothers as a teenager. And I had just a year before been driving around New Jersey, like getting high, listening to like Bohemian Rhapsody or like Tom Petty, and like suddenly they're like, "Are you ready to get on stage?
Come on.
You know, come join us for the encore." And it's a surreal. So I think and I think also the people you're surrounded by have a lot of influence on you.
They do.
Like if you're surrounded by people who make you feel inadequate, insecure, less than, you feel like to be them, to be successful, you have to make people. So in my case, I was very lucky. Like the first Queen concert that we performed at, Brian May came up to me, an idol, the writer of Bohemian Rhapsody and all these songs. And he's like that tall, and he's got like the hair, like the Pharaoh of Egypt. And he's like, "I'm terribly sorry." And I'm like, "What do you mean you're terribly sorry?" And he was like, "I didn't get to see your band open for us." And when you're an opening act, you're like the garbage collector. If you
Boo, get off the stage.
You're the worst
Queen.
But he was like, I said, "Look, we went on at 12 noon. You went on with Freddie Mercury and John Deacon at 8 p.m. And between us was U2, Status Quo, Big Country, In Excess. Why would you be sorry?" And he made it like, when you're on our tour, you're family.
That's cool.
And I found that too with Freddie Mercury, that I got on stage when they had a party and we were just jamming, and they're like, "Come on, get on stage with us." So I thought, if these people can be so talented, so successful, and so warm and welcoming, then who am I to put on any kind of pretentiousness or think because I'm intelligent or successful or anything that I'm above anyone else. We're here to serve.
We are.
And I think that that's part of it.
Can I ask you a question? Biopics have come out about both Freddie Mercury and the band Queen and Elton John. Both of which I found incredibly moving and would definitely fall in the top 10 of biopics that I've ever seen. Like, I really was inspired, moved, heartbroken, full of drive and inspiration. So how do you feel about those movies? Because they're much closer to home for you. And if you had a biopic made about your life, because you have had an extraordinary life with extraordinary success in a similar type of field, do you have a preference in how those two biopics were made? And would you prefer that one producer director might be the one to kind of jump in and help tell your story?
Well, personally, I really cried and was moved very deeply by the Queen movie because it was all about getting to Live Aid. That was the goal. That was the finish line. And I was at Live Aid.
Wow.
And I was a guest of John Reed, who's made out to be a bad guy in both movies, but he made both of them very rich and very famous, so he wasn't such a bad guy.
I understand. Everything's complex and layered.
Everything is complex and layered. So I was a guest of John Reed's, and backstage at Wembley, it was like a carnival. They had like cotton candy and popcorn and serving drinks and food and people walking around. And I think I was on Quaaludes or something. Like, I was,
as most were back
very
then,
happy.
Right?
Very happy. And I mean, David Bowie came out and played with Mick Ronson, his original guitarist from the Spiders from Mars. Elton John duetted with George Michael on "Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me." And when Queen came out and they did that, boom, boom, we will. I mean, 80,000 people doing that. It was wow. So I was very personally feeling connected to the Bohemian Rhapsody movie and the hardships that they went through. Whereas the Elton John movie, because Elton is still alive, and I'll be honest, it's the same thing with any John Lennon back thing. Like,
Yeah.
because Elton is alive, there has to be a bit of ass kissing in the movie, you
Different.
know, in the John Lennon movies. And I love John, he's my hero. And I've met Yoko and I've worked with Sean, the son. But, you know, there has to be a certain amount of like bowing down.
Right.
You know, so with Elton, you know, what really touched me is in 1980, 81 or 82, Elton John played a free concert in Central Park.
Yeah.
And it was hundreds of thousands of people.
Amazing.
And I was just floating down the Delaware River on a tube that day, probably also on Quaaludes.
Right.
Why? Why did they outlaw Quaaludes? The best thing ever. So, if there are no Quaaludes, I'm just drinking water from here on out. So, I you know, like I literally was floating down, tubing down a river, got dressed up, went to a boat called the Peking. It's an ancient Chinese, like old-fashioned sailing boat, and they had this party for Elton.
Right.
And the most fabulous jet set people flew in. Everyone looked so beautiful and was so gorgeous, like the Stones were there.
Right.
And you know, when Elton came, he was standing on, you know, like the board where you walk onto the boat.
Right.
And I looked at him and I just saw so much loneliness and so much sorrow that here he was, you know, it was not even near his end where he got sober, but here he was like king of the world, but he was really all alone.
Yeah.
And I felt a incredible, I could feel the sadness from across the room. And so luckily now he's happy, but you know, the Queen were kind of like, it was party. I mean, Elton was party time too. But
Right.
if I do a movie, I'm doing actually a memoir about my life.
Are you? Okay.
It's called Life is Larry, and it's
Life is Larry. I like
I
it.
didn't know that Happy is Larry was a phrase. There might have to be the
Might have
English
to change
version.
the name of the book.
But it's
Happy
just
as
all
Larry.
these stories. I'm just telling the stories, and the idea is not like, oh, I'm glamorous. The idea is more, if I could do it, you could do it. I came from ordinary beginnings, and just, it's sort of like when you're doing what you love and you get into flow, eventually the right stuff kind of lines up for you. Like a
Right.
lot of stuff, it almost lines up. And you go
Right.
through countless, like this almost happened, that almost happened. This deal fell through, that thing, that show didn't get made, that record got canceled. But then eventually you find your people and your flow.
Yes, that's right.
And so it's an amazing gift that we have in Web3 right now.
Yeah.
So, for instance, also is just what we talk about. I'm supposed to be interviewing you. This isn't going very well at all.
I'm enjoying it
So,
immensely.
so I'm 64 years old. If I went to Sony Records or Universal Records right now and said, you know, I've worked with some of the greatest musicians in one way or another, songwriting or remixing or producing or something, getting a deal like as a, you know, a representative, you know, if I say, you know, David Bowie or Sean Lennon or a Bono project or doing something for the UN, they're like, yeah, but did you just produce, you know, Drake or, you know, Dua Lipa? Like, oh, you didn't work with Dua Lipa? Like, come back when you had a hit, you know, in the last 20 minutes.
Right.
Whereas when I go into the Web3 space, people actually really respect what you've done in your life, not what you've done in the last 30 seconds.
I call it a culture of honor.
Yeah.
So there's one of the areas that I'd like to see the Web3 space grow in is a culture of generosity.
Yeah.
Not to say that there's not generosity, there's extravagant generosity.
Yeah.
However, I do think that it's an area that the Web3 movement can grow in, is to be obnoxiously generous.
Yes.
Over the top, ridiculous generous.
Yeah.
And I think it's possible because it would match the culture of honor that's in place.
Yeah.
We have a tendency in this environment to give great honor to one another and to call out the gold in each other and to see the best in each other and to be gracious with mistakes, which is mistakes happen all the time just with the technology, let alone the fact we don't really know what we're doing quite yet, right?
Right.
So I think that's a lot of what is felt, is that culture of honor. That sense that people you come into the space and we honor all the things that you've done as a creative, all the things you've done as an artist, all the things you've done to support other creative artists over the last several decades, and recognizing that you come not only with relationships and still wanting to be a driven artist yourself, but also you come with wisdom. Yeah. And you come with, you can, hey, well, time out. I've taken that path, everybody.
Yeah.
Doesn't end well.
Yeah.
Or hey, here's a shortcut.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot that the community in general recognizes that you bring, but you're also a very likable person, you're a very loving person, so it's another reason why you have had such a great experience here, is that this environment really, really has catered to the lovers, where a music record environment where you're trying to just get a single done or a record done or a tour done or a licensing deal done or a songwriting agreement done, that is very business focused, and it really is not much about the art when it's coming down to getting a deal done at the same way.
I try to, for the first, let's say, year and a half, since Clubhouse days, where a lot of people kind of entered the space since the pandemic started, I'm an artist, but I've only been collecting, really.
Right.
I've just, and not collecting the typical PFP projects, but friends whose work really needs support.
Yeah.
So I've entered the space again, like giving precedes getting. So I've been collecting little friends art, talking about people doing that. And even I have a project coming up with David Bowie. I produced a song
really looking forward to that.
20 years ago. So before I even started going to the NFT community for partners, I went to the charity for the Grammys called Music Cares, because when the pandemic struck, all live music just stopped. People stopped tours, clubs closed, Broadway shows here in London, all the Shaftesbury Avenue things shut down. So they helped last year 37,000 musicians who couldn't pay their rent or needed help with their medical bills.
Right.
So even before I started looking for partners in the tech space, went to the charity first and said, I'm going to just give you a healthy chunk of money from whatever I make and on this. So that was so I'm planting the seed in fertile ground.
I like that.
And then when I talk about it, I say, not only are we going to do well and people are fans of this artist, but we're going to do really good, and that's the story in and of itself.
Yes.
I think that, it's a very young space, so there's a lot of immature. When I say immature, I don't mean emotionally, I just mean they're artists that have never had attention before. Right. And I know from being in music, when you get attention, it's like a very sweet wine. It's really seductive. You get drunk really fast, and you think you are king of the world because you have a lot of followers or your thing's sold out on Nifty Gateway. And you don't realize, like getting a chunk of Ethereum is not a vocation. It's just a momentary
moment in time.
hit, and the next one may completely miss. The market may just swing toward other things.
Well, attention's like praise. Another friend of mine, Ed Silvoso, he has this line I love. He says, when you get praised, it's like perfume. You're supposed to enjoy the aroma, but you don't drink it in. Yeah. You don't grab perfume and start guzzling it down. Yeah. You put it on, you enjoy the aroma, you let others also benefit from smelling good, and attention is very much the same thing.
And also, I've learned that both attention and criticism can be poison darts.
Yes, they can.
Because they can put you off the path.
Yeah.
We know plenty of people who just have to be always complimented and petted, and we've seen it in politics and culture.
Right.
And then it's kind of annoying. And then also criticism is a poison dart because it makes you doubt yourself.
Right.
And usually people who are starting out are starting out really stepping into the unknown. It's like going into the wilderness. You really don't know what will happen.
Yeah.
So I think both are, and I also want to say that the NFT.NYC crew of people are extremely unique.
They are very unique.
They're very unique. There's also, I'm like an octopus. I have fingers in different areas. So there's a whole other crew of people who are very popular in the NFT space.
Yes.
that are like, it reminds me of high school. Like they're
Yes.
all sitting at a table, they're all doing the same Twitter spaces, they're
Right.
all doing the same satellite events off of NFT.NYC.
Sure.
Like, you know, they're all like palling around with each other. And I also feel sometimes like I'm like on the B list, not the A list, but like I'm sitting at the table near the quarterback and the cheerleader, like
Yeah.
waving. Like, I know your stuff just sold out on Sotheby's, but you know, I've got a really cool person to introduce you to and,
Right.
and do that. And so there's still a lot of growing up.
I would
in the
just say, I would
space.
say give it time. You know, I think that NFT NYC is the most centralized, organic Web3 event that's large.
Yeah.
It might be the largest Web3 event in the world.
Yeah.
But it's definitely the most centralized, right?
Yeah.
Because there's a team led by a man, Jody Rich, that runs a company, .cred, and Jody and .cred are going to make the decisions for what happens for NFT NYC and NFT London. If anybody doesn't like the decisions he makes, then they may not choose to engage, and people just may not choose to engage because it is a centralized event. Like, we don't want to go to the big thing. So we, as a team, have said, well, let's foster community events.
Yeah.
So almost 500 community events in New York in June. We have almost 100 community events here in London, our first year here. So I always describe our environment as like, we are the anchor, we drop the anchor, we kind of hold it down, and then everybody can attach their kite to us,
Right.
And their kite can be big, their kite can be small, their string can be
Right.
long, their string
Right.
can be short, right? They can have any kite they want, and we're gonna anchor them down with our centralized event, and that's the decentralized nature. What I see happening is a lot of these cliques that you're talking about, they will dissolve and break down into multiple different types of decentralized communities.
Yeah.
And if you give enough time, these leaders will grow in nobility, these communities will grow in nobility, as well as savagery, and be more
Right.
aggressive,
Yeah.
and find ways of how do we accomplish these goals in a quick enough time and do it in the right way so it's sustainable. 'Cause
Yeah.
sustainability is huge. And if people feel like they're out of the clique or out of the cool kid club, then there is a question around sustainability of
Right.
the movement.
Yeah, and about the generosity thing, because there is a nobility, like where people are recognizing one another. I think people, you know, in the early days of Microsoft, everything that I read a, you know, a biography of Bill Gates,
Yeah.
and you know, it was like zero-sum game. Like, I am going to just kill the enemy.
Right.
And once he got to the top, you know, like the Dalai Lama says, the happiest person is the person who brings the most happiness to others.
That's right.
And once you get to the mountaintop, I mean, the only thing you can do to stay happy is to help other people up the mountaintop. And so I think there are people in the space like Keith Grossman at Time Magazine who just did a time like for New York Cares, you
Yeah.
know, a charity that he belongs to.
I love what he's doing at
And
Time.
I bought 10 of them.
Yeah.
I don't need 10 weird AI things that are like really bad
Right,
AI,
right,
to be
right,
honest
right.
with you, like letters that don't make sense.
Right.
But the support of someone in the community doing something
Yes.
good for people in need
Right.
was the reason, not for me to be a collector of great art, but to say this is something important. And the only reason why he can do that is he's at a point where his salary is, he can live very comfortably.
Right.
He's got assets of a company with a, you know, a tech division and a social media
Right.
division. A lot of people starting out are look bigger on Twitter than they are. They're
Right.
still like month to month, check to check, or their
Right.
Ethereum, they didn't cash any of it out and it fell by 2/3, and they're like, oh
Right.
my God, I'm broke again.
Right.
So I think
Right.
that the people who are coming into the space and doing charitable things are people who have the ability to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, almost everything that I do has to have a charitable component. And there's a selfish thing in it, in that I want to be able to, you know, like I put out a single for one of the Beach Boys, like a CD, because
Yeah.
people who listen to the Beach Boys still have CD players.
Right.
And you know, and he signed it, and I gave 10% to the World's Central Kitchen because it was during the pandemic, and they They set up food banks like outside the hospitals because the doctors were working 24 hours a day and the restaurants were closed, and they helped keep the restaurants open by ordering 500 lunches for this hospital and 1,000 for that. So if I do that, I just believe in this theory. I work with a company, NFT Oasis, and it's a metaverse.
Right.
And our founder, Willa Bryan, is this amazing avatar guy who went to Puerto Rico and signed a declaration of abundance.
I love that.
Like, instead of scarcity, instead of like we're in competition with you, we're out to get you, or there's only one of, and it's rare, so it's spend your baby's milk money on it. Like, we're in this idea of abundance, that we're part of a system that is it's like stars in the sky. There's enough for everyone. And so a little bit of that abundant mindset.
I always say, there's a misconception around a pie, and I want a bigger slice, so people need to have less pie.
Yeah.
And the misconception is that the pie is actually unlimited depth.
Yeah.
So there's too much pie for the world.
Yeah.
For some reason, we have broken systems that have allocated, let's say, 50% of the pie to a very small fraction of humans, which has then left the other 99.9% of humans to kind of fight over the other 50%, feeling like it's limited, but it's not. Yeah. We have everything it takes to have everybody's shelter needs taken care of, all of their transportation needs taken care of, all of their nutritional needs taken care of. We even have everything to take care of everybody's spiritual needs, regardless of what their spiritual beliefs are. And so their emotional needs, right? So we have everything it takes. We live in absolute abundance. We just have some broken models and broken systems that we have not yet put to rest and enacted more enlightened, approaches to these things. Yeah. But the good news is that we can change. Yeah. And it seems as though we are evolving as humanity, and that change is on the horizon. I think automation matters. That's why I love the automation of smart contracts. I love the automation of DeFi, of AI, of all these different things that allow machines and computers and distributed servers to do things on our behalf that humans would have to manually do, so that we're freed up with our time.
Yeah, I'm not afraid of the future. No. Like, I'm not afraid of AI.
I long for it. I say, hello, future.
I'm not afraid
nice to meet you.
I'm not afraid of Elon Musk taking over Twitter, because just like Jody said last night, it could actually, here's a guy who said there's a problem. The world is going to end if we keep using fossil fuels. Right. So I'm going to go up against gigantic companies that are entrenched and that have fleets of lobbyists that have killed the electric car and the hybrid car. I'm going to go up against them, and I'm going to win. Right. Like, that's not a person who's thinking just for themselves. Right. And because of that, and they're able to execute on such a crazy scale, they have done remarkable things. I say this because I met Kimball Musk at NFT.NYC.
Yeah, he came and speak on the stage at Town Hall where I was at. It was amazing.
Interview him, and then I went to Las Vegas, and I can just tell by being with Kimball Musk, and that his brother came with him to Burning Man this year, where I went with Nikita, my partner. Like, good things are going to happen there, but we're frightened of change. We're hardwired as humans to a brain that, like, if something's changing, it could mean the end of us. And yes, so
whatever part is in humans, mine's broken. Yeah. I'm like, I'm frightened of things staying the same.
Yeah.
I long for change.
And what you said about the system's broken, I read something about an interview with Bono, and he was getting the G8 leaders to forgive debts for nations in Africa and people, and doing all kinds of fundraising. And he realized just throwing money at a country or a problem isn't enough. You have to really change the system and educate the generations of people to kind of behave differently.
Yeah, financial charity in and of itself, that act of philanthropy it will be received by a black hole. So if your philanthropy is only financial charity, whether it's US dollars or Ethereum or whatever, you will always find black holes that will take whatever you'll give.
Yeah.
So it takes more than just the charitable act of giving away what we use to exchange value. You have to also give education.
Yep.
You have to help people change the inside of them. One of my interesting thoughts is, if you take a king or a prince and you put them in a jail, they'll be running the jail soon enough. If you take a prisoner and you put them in the palace, that palace will become a prison before too long.
Yeah.
So until we help people change on the inside, their thought process, how they feel, then all we could give as much money as we want to them or their organization or their community. It takes both things at one time. We're having a very philosophical conversation.
Yeah, and I think we want to continue it. Can we have this as part one?
Yes, this is part one.
Yeah, because...
and until we reconvene maybe at the VIP event that we're all heading to.
Yeah, and reconvene over there
I think
because,
so.
I mean, we can go on for hours,
Yes, we
I
can.
think. And I also want to talk to you because I myself have put together a docu-series to shine a light on where the space is and where it's going.
Yeah.
And it's meant to not just be, okay, we're going to do this on Coinbase's metaverse. It's meant to be on a larger scale platform because I want people who don't know. I had the conversation after our dinner with a TV producer who's like, so an NFT is like cryptocurrency, right?
Right.
Like, what is that? It's like, why isn't this you just take a picture of something and that's enough? And to even begin to explain to someone who's really skilled and successful in the media business what this is, the average person is still several miles away from a point of entry. And so I really want to be able to shine a light on these incredible stories that are happening right now. That people's lives are... I'm wearing a pin by a 16-year-old named Jasty. And he was a kid who was doodling in his room and somehow got to put a picture up on Super Rare, and he thought, like, somebody will buy it for $30. Fuocious was just, up late and scrolling, and he saw it, and he's like, oh, I'll put a bid in, and like put like 10 ETH or something on it. And so his first thing sold for like $20,000 or something, and then somebody resold it for $60,000.
Wow.
And he was featured in March on a CBS special, and they went to his house. His parents, his mom Stacy is a friend of mine, and she's like, she quit her job. She's just like, I'm going to manage my 16-year-old son. Like people are putting him on at VCon. He was on stage with Keith Grossman at the time. Like,
That's awesome.
Extraordinary opportunities are happening. It's what Ken Burns, the documentarian, says, lightning strikes. There are moments in history when just lightning strikes in a point. And that point, if you happen to be standing there, you become Michelangelo or Botticelli or Da Vinci or Joni Mitchell or Graham Nash or Jim Morrison. Like, you're right in that moment. This is that moment.
This is that moment.
For a lot of different people.
Absolutely.
It's fantastic.
Yes.
So.
Okay, till next time.
Boom. Boom.